Senator from Texas.
President, are we in a quorum call?
The Senate is.
I'd ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, for 3 decades, the Violence Against Women Act has been at the forefront of our efforts to support victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. This legislation provides survivors with access to programs and resources that promote safety and healing. It bolsters our criminal justice response through protections for survivors and provides critical training for law enforcement officials. It prioritizes programs and grants to prevent domestic violence and sexual assault from occurring in the first place. I've been a long-time victims' rights advocate dating back to my time as Attorney General of my state, and I'm a proud supporter of the Violence Against Women Act, and I think that's a common sentiment in this chamber. Republicans and Democrats alike agree we must do more to provide services and protection for victims of domestic violence, even though we don't always agree on just exactly what those changes should look like. Unfortunately, like many good bipartisan ideas, this became a political football over time. When the time came to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act in 2019, it was dragged through the gutter of Washington politics. Some of our friends across the aisle prioritize controversial partisan provisions over sound bipartisan policy. They even opposed the short-term reauthorization of the existing law when we couldn't agree, and ultimately the Violence Against Women Act even expired. But here's the good news. For 3 long years, a bipartisan group of our colleagues has continued to work on a longer-term reauthorization, and for a while, it looked like we were making good progress. Our friend from Iowa, Senator Ernst, is an unshakable advocate for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and she's led the efforts on this side of the aisle to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. She's worked with a bipartisan group of senators to come up with something that's acceptable to both sides, but they were never able to move past the controversial sticking points until now. And apparently the tides have shifted, and I'm grateful for that. After 3 years of waiting, we've seen real progress on efforts to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. Last week, a bipartisan group of senators introduced legislation to extend and modernize that legislation, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of that. Senators Ernst from Iowa and Senator Murkowski, our Alaska colleague, have led this effort on the Republican side, and I want to commend our colleagues for their leadership. They put in countless hours over the last few years to reach this compromise, and obviously it was not easy. The fact that this bill already has more than 20 bipartisan co-sponsors speaks volumes about their success. We couldn't have gotten to this point without the dedication of our friend, the senior senator from California, Senator Feinstein, who's been engaged in these discussions from the beginning. I appreciate the hard work that she and Senator Durbin, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, put into this bill, and their willingness to make sensible compromises so we can hopefully get this signed into law without further delay. Like all legislation, this bill is not perfect, but as the saying goes, you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Throughout the negotiating process, I've raised concerns about some of the provisions, and I've seen our colleagues work in good faith with us to address many of those issues. There's no question in my mind that this is a good bill that will go a long way to modernize the Violence Against Women Act and ensure that it continues to serve survivors. The Vawa Reauthorization Act extends this legislation through 2027 and builds on the advancements made in previous reauthorizations. It improves access to services, especially those in rural communities with fewer resources. It promotes partnerships with law enforcement and victim service organizations to provide victim-centered training for law enforcement officers. It improves grants to help school-based professionals connect students with victim services, and strengthens existing campus grant programs for colleges and universities. It establishes a pilot program to support domestic violence victims seeking employment, and it takes aim at relatively new threats, including cyber crimes, by establishing the National Resource Center on Cyber Crimes against Individuals. This legislation also invests in a broad range of grant programs, training, and resources to support survivors of domestic violence and prevent similar crimes from occurring in the future. I'm glad this legislation includes provisions from a number of bipartisan bills that I've introduced with colleagues here in the Senate. One example is a bill that the presiding officer will appreciate that I introduced with Senator Coons, called the NICS Denial Notification Act. If someone attempts to purchase a gun, in other words, they lie about their legal qualification to purchase a gun, but is denied when the NICS background check system comes back with a hit, indicating that they're disqualified for one of a variety of legal reasons. Right now, local law enforcement is not notified that somebody tried to buy a firearm and lied about it and was denied access to that firearm because of the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Under current law, federal officials are notified when individuals, including convicted felons and domestic abusers, fail a background check, but they're not required to notify state and local law enforcement, the people in the best position to actually be on the lookout for people who may be a danger to their community and to themselves. This legislation will change that. This legislation will require the Department of Justice to notify relevant state and local authorities within 24 hours of a failed background check. Now, there are some organizations that are disparaging this particular provision, basically misrepresenting what it does. So I want to be clear about what it does do. What it does do is addresses somebody who lies in the course of filling out a background check, indicating that they are not disqualified, only to find out when checking the system that they in fact are. Obviously, these folks are up to no good if they're lying about their ability to purchase a firearm under current law. And it just makes sense that in addition to federal officials being notified of convicted felons and domestic violence abusers, that state and local law enforcement be notified as well. This notification would include the name of the individual as well as when and where they attempt to purchase a firearm. This information gives law enforcement the ability to investigate and intervene before a potentially deadly attack occurs. It should set off all sorts of alarms when a convicted felon or domestic violence abuser lies in an attempt to purchase a firearm. The Violence Against Women Act Reauthorization Act also includes legislation that I introduced with Senator Durbin, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's called Supporting Access to Nurse Exams Act. Sexual assault nurse examiners, known as SANEs, are on the front lines of our fight to support victims of sexual assault. These are the nurses that perform the forensic examinations on rape victims and who help identify and convict sexual offenders. This provision improves an existing grant program that funds sexual assault forensic exam programs. We don't have enough of these SANEs or nurse examiners. This bill will put more money into the field to train more of these SANEs, to provide for their salaries, and to increase access in areas of the country that need SANEs more, particularly rural areas. These men and women are crucial to our efforts to deliver justice, and this is an important step we can take to address the nationwide shortage of sexual assault nurses. Over the years, the Senate and the Congress has done a lot to eliminate the Rape Kit Backlog, which at one point totaled and reported 400,000 backlog rape kits. These rape kits are forensic examination kits which contain the DNA, which is so essential to identify the perpetrators of sexual assault, and which has the miraculous ability, or seemingly miraculous ability, to actually exonerate some people who may be misidentified through a visual identification. But it also helps over a period of a long time to identify people who may have evaded prosecution because of a statute of limitation, because many of these individuals who commit these sexual assaults will do so on a serial basis. So once we've been able to identify them through a successful rape kit evaluation, we can bring them to justice. Once again, I want to commend Senators Ernst and Murkowski for their tireless efforts on behalf of victims nationwide to get us to this point. The Violence Against Women Act has changed the lives, improved the lives, actually, of countless survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So it's time for us to come together and to reauthorize this crucial program. I'm proud to support this legislation, and I hope Senator Schumer, the majority leader, can find time to put it on the Senate calendar and to vote it out without delay. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.